The Republican establishment is really freaking out now, which we've talked about on the show. It's, again, ironic and hilarious and pathetic because the same forces that the Republican establishment have been feeding and cultivating in iterations, I would argue, going back to Nixon. Never forget, let's talk about Ronald Reagan for a second. Never forget what Ronald Reagan, I believe, announced for president. His run for the presidency in a town where civil rights workers were murdered. And, he had a message about states' rights. Everybody knows what you're talking about. Going through to the modern era of the Republican Party. So Donald Trump, which we've talked about many times, is the perfect embodiment in many ways of this Republican base. And I would also say to sort of fully even out some of the blame, there's also an anger and a rage in the white working classes and some of the things that Trump is speaking to, which obviously also reflects a failure of actual progressive politics to be practiced by the Democratic Party. That's an issue too. But anyways, the Republican elites are freaking out. And the first tack that we talked about was that they were going to, John Kasich's PAC was going to run ads saying that Donald Trump isn't experienced and therefore he's like Barack Obama, which is, of course, a total fail and never is going to go anywhere. But now John Kasich's second ad from that his people put out, which is kind of stunning, actually compared Donald Trump indirectly, but not all that indirectly, to Hitler. And now you're seeing the Republican elites talk about Donald Trump and fascism a lot more than a lot of liberals and left-wing pundits. So let's listen to that John Kasich ad, and then we'll take it from there.
I would like anyone who is listening to consider some thoughts that I paraphrase from the words of German pastor Martin Niemöller. You might not care if Donald Trump says Muslims must register with their government because you're not one. And you might not care if Donald Trump says he's going to round up all the Hispanic immigrants because you're not one. And you might not care if Donald Trump says it's okay to rough up black protesters because you're not one. And you might not care if Donald Trump wants to suppress journalists because you're not one. But think about this. If he keeps going and he actually becomes president, he might just get around to you. And you better hope that there's someone left to help you.
All right, so that's an interesting ad. I think that might have some effects on the slight margins of people who, if there's any appeal left to them in any way around an electability argument. But look, for most of Donald Trump's base, for most people voting for Donald Trump, that ad's not going to resonate because they are never going to be the target of Donald Trump because they're the right Americans. They're not Muslims. They're not terrorists. They're not illegals coming in over the borders. They're not some sissy journalist whining about multiculturalism and excusing ISIS or whatever other these fantasies that these people have. They're the right people. They're the silent majority. They're the, oppressed people who can't be proud to be white or whatever.